Is Sabertooth actually superior to Wolverine? And is he continuing to go stronger than Wolverine could possibly ever imagine? The rivalry between Wolverine and Sabertooth is a feud that dates back decades, as the two are intrinsically linked in many ways, if not dating back centuries. They are often depicted as peers with very similar mutations, and as dark mirrors of one another. They continually come into repeated conflicts at every turn. But is Sabertooth's mutation actually stronger than that of Wolverine? Does it grant him more skills and power than Logan? And if so, why is this? Well, today we'll be breaking down the mutations of Wolverine and Sabertooth, and explain the theory that Sabertooth's mutation is actually superior to that of the Wolverine. Logan and Victor have very similar mutations in many ways, and although they are not identical, there is a lot of overlap between the two of them. Their healing factors are nearly equal. Their retractable claws may look visually different, but are quite similar on a functional level. But that's not what we're going to be focusing on today, as we know their mutations go much further. Their heightened senses and bestial nature are the product of a trait known as atavism, which is the trait that we're going to be paying the most attention to today. At its core, atavism is the cousin of evolution. Evolution allows organisms to gain traits over the course of thousands of years through natural selection, in order for future generations to become stronger than their ancestors were. The strongest of a species can survive the harshest conditions, and then pass these traits down to the future generations. But these traits are not always physical strength and speed. Oftentimes, the single trait that is the most beneficial to an organism is their intelligence and ability to creatively problem solve. And this is a facet of the Marvel Universe as well. Atavism, however, is a retroactive counterpart to evolution. This is the ability to regain traits and attributes that have otherwise been lost, and both Wolverine and Sabertooth have this trait embedded deep within their mutation. For Wolverine and Sabertooth, their atavism results in a more primal set of instincts, not just in terms of their senses, but also in their bloodlust and their feral desires. When Wolverine goes into a berserker rage, he's not just becoming angrier, he's literally reverting to a less evolved state of savagery, and this is a byproduct of atavism. This is their hunting instinct, their urge to butcher, and the trait that clouds their reasonable mind when they get into a heightened state of anger or fear. It allows them to become stronger and faster when it's active, like savages in the distant past, kind of like the world's most aggressive adrenaline rush. When Wolverine received his adamantium skeleton, the procedure came with a series of drawbacks as well as advantages, which we've talked about in depth in other videos. The upsides are fairly obvious, with an increased combat durability, more destructive output, and an overall higher constitution. But the skeleton resulted in a loss of agility and an inability to swim effectively, but most importantly, a weakening of his healing factor. Now, Logan's healing factor has to consistently work on overtime in order to stave off the adamantium poisoning, which would have killed any other being. This means that thanks to the procedure, Logan's healing factor has actually slowed down. But what's not talked about though, is that this atavism was also handicapped by this same procedure. And as we've talked about before on the Feral Wolverine storyline, which took these violent traits and brought them back and put them on overdrive once the adamantium was removed from Logan's skeleton. In the story, Magneto ripped the adamantium out of Wolverine's body so that his mutation was no longer hampered, and he slowly became more and more of a savage. The resulting noseless Wolverine storyline is mostly forgettable, but what's important to note about Wolverine is that Sabertooth has the very same mutation in this respect. Atavism is a trait present in both of their mutations, but Sabertooth never underwent the Weapon X procedure. He never had adamantium bonded to his skeleton. He's just continued to grow and evolve with the natural course of his mutation. What this meant for Sabertooth is that as the years went on, Sabertooth's mutation was not hampered and continued evolving as his life continued. Sabertooth kept getting stronger, faster, and more bestial as time went on. So in many of their later encounters, Sabertooth is physically accelerating faster than Wolverine in terms of their respective evolution. He is more brutal, and this is a result of two pieces. First, Sabertooth's physical strength, as we mentioned, continues to grow. But secondly, his inhibitions and his morals are lowered. Sabertooth simply stops caring about the limitations of human potential, and Sabertooth cannot wrap his mind around mortality or morality any longer, depending on how far his mutation has grown. Wolverine's adamantium claws and skeleton give him the ability to contend with Sabertooth, but when his healing factor keeps getting more advanced as time goes on, there's only so much of a difference between adamantium claws and bone claws. But there are downsides to Sabertooth's. His atavism is slowly deteriorating his mind as well, which means that while he is physically evolving faster than Logan is, mentally, he is regressing far faster than Wolverine. His bestial traits are becoming more and more dominant by the day, and slowly, Sabertooth is actually losing his mind. He is becoming more savage, operating on instinct than his conscious planning, or any intent or desire that goes beyond an animalistic trait. We can actually see this in the Fox films, as Sabertooth evolves over the course of several decades and becomes more animal-like. The Fox X-Men timeline is notoriously difficult to sift through and track, and there really isn't a right answer for how these timelines have been broken down. But we do believe that we have a workable depiction that does suggest the origins takes place on the main timeline leading into the original X-Men movies. When we see him in X-Men Origins, he is refined and tactical, and even though he is incredibly violent, he is still intelligent and still very much human. His animalistic tendencies lead to him butchering many of his enemies, but this only gets worse as time goes on. By the time we get to the original trilogy, we see Sabertooth again after nearly 2 decades, and his mind is nearly gone. The first thing we notice about Victor Creed is that he is much more savage than he previously appeared to be in Origins. He has inky black eyes, he doesn't speak very much, and seems to be an enforcer of Magneto, one that takes orders. But he doesn't have his own autonomy anymore, at least not the same extent that he did in Origins. He is a feral, black-eyed henchman who serves Magneto without any autonomy over his own decisions. At this point, he is more animal than man, and this is a byproduct of his mutation, which would have done the same thing to Wolverine if he had never undergone the Weapon X procedure. The feral Wolverine storyline shows exactly what Wolverine would have become, both in terms of his mental resolve and his physical powers, which is what we're seeing with Sabertooth. The limitations that Wolverine gets on his mutation also keeps his mind intact, because his atavism is nowhere near as strong as Victor's is. Whether or not this is a straight up benefit or a downside is a bit ambiguous, because there are pros and cons to each side. Victor's enhanced strength, speed, senses, and healing factor have proven to be a major problem for Wolverine beyond physical capacity, making him an incredibly dangerous threat, especially when he's working at the behest of someone else like Magneto. If Sabertooth is ever pulled into a henchman-like role like we see in the original trilogy, he will be a highly dangerous asset if the head of the operation is intelligent and effective. He won't think for himself, but he can be aimed with ferocity. In every passing day, it becomes more difficult to take down Sabertooth, but it also strains his grip on reality. So physically speaking, he does oftentimes become superior to Logan in the later years, but with these dire consequences. But anyway friends, what do you think of this particular aspect of Wolverine and Sabertooth's mutation? Do you think his augmented strength and speed are benefits? And most importantly, are they worth the gradual deterioration of Sabertooth's mental capacity? Does this make him superior to Wolverine? Or would you say that Wolverine's mind keeps him stronger than Sabertooth? What are your thoughts on the old rivalry between the two of them? And which of the two mutants are truly stronger? As always, my friends, Hulk smash that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and I hope you're having a phenomenal day.